So I'm here in Visual Studio back in the Mod 7 Exercise 1 Start project, and what we want to do is start this up and look at some of the diagnostic data that's available to us. So first, this is the app that's running that we added the management endpoint to earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and just run this. And it's now running using the embedded server. I'll now go back to the Event Flow Debugger and log into the server. Here in the Event Flow Debugger, I'm going to connect to the embedded endpoint because I'm using my embedded host. And once I look at this, I can look at things like the query manager. I can see there's one query deployed, it's got some streams involved, there's some operators there. I can see for the particular queries, there's nothing going on here at the moment. I haven't run anything through the system. Before things like queries, I can see like how many total events I've consumed, how many I've produced, what's the total consumed latency, what's the produced latency, what's the last CTI that's gone through the system. So if we send a couple messages through here, we can actually see some numbers. So I'll go ahead and just send 10 events through. If we come back, we can see we have 10 total incoming events. We've got some output events. We've got all sorts of information here. I can see the last CTI. I can see my overall latency in the system. And I can see some of the system time. Next, I can go ahead and down to the application level. And at the query level, I can also show diagnostics. Again, showing some details at the query level. And I'm seeing details that this query in particular is running. When did it start? How much memory is being used? How much CPU time is used? Again, its latency and performance, and its last CTI. So some interesting information I can see about my individual query here. Likewise, I can go to the event viewer and see some interesting events about the startup of this query. In the event viewer now, under Windows Log and Applications, I can refresh and I can see some core events get written here. Specifically, I can see starting, that the server was created, the query is initialized, and the query is running. So if the query gets stopped and so forth, I can see those events as well. If the query gets suspended or if there's problems, I can see that. So the event log's not providing me a particularly verbose view, but it is giving me some core events. Now let's go to perfmon and look at some things in there. So here in perfmon, I can now add counters for StreamInsight related things. I can navigate to StreamInsight, and because I haven't turned it on yet, input adapter there's nothing available, query there's nothing available, but server is always on. So I can go ahead and pick the managed host, and I can click OK. And I can look at some additional information about my host. How many events are in the input queue, how many events are in the output queue, as well as some memory and the number of running queries. So nothing overly thrilling. I can see I have one running query at the moment. I'm not really using any memory. There's nothing processing through since the performance counter started. But how do I now go back and enable queries to be run? Let's go back to my Visual Studio project, stop it, and make some changes. What I want to do in my application, down in this function, is go down to the point after I've already deployed my query, and I want to write some code that will loop through them and enable them for diagnostics. So I've written the code, and in this case does a very coarse approach. I'm looking at every query in the application, and I'm going ahead and simply setting its settings to turn this on. And I'm setting the diagnostic settings for every particular query in here. And what this will do is mean when I run this, and I now connect back to Performance Monitor, I should see entries for both the input adapter and the query. Back here in perfmon, I can now click Add. And if I go back to StreamInsight under Input Adapter, now I see something. And I can expand these. You can see what sort of things are available. Adjusted events, the CTIs, dropped events, events in the queue, things per second. So I can go ahead and add this. My query also exposes some counters. CTIs produced, events produced, and so forth. So I can pick this. Sure enough, I also see one here. And I can click OK. So now I've got all sorts of StreamInsight related stuff here. I'm seeing from the adapter, from the query, all of this information in here. So I can clear this and then go ahead and send a bunch of events through. And I can see some things happening. I'll send 25 a couple of times and spread it out. And I can see the various spikes. So I can see that might be using a little memory. More importantly, I can see some things like the number of CTIs, or I can see some values here for how many events I've produced. I haven't dropped any events, how many events I'm producing per second, how many CTIs I'm producing. So all sorts of information I'm able to see from the perf counters and doing some tracing here.